Hey guys!
Welcome back to our channel. If you are new here, my name is Alexis and I am from the US.
And I am Louis and I am Swiss.
And we live together here in Switzerland, and our channel is all about living, but more specifically traveling in Switzerland. So if that sounds interesting to you, make sure to hit that subscribe button to stick around. So you saw it in the title. In this video, we're going to be going through the top 20 tourist mistakes that we see people making in Switzerland and how to avoid them. So you saw it in the title. In this video, we're going to be going over 20 tourist mistakes that we hope you can avoid.
Yeah.
You might be wondering how we came up with these mistakes. We actually asked our audience on Instagram. You can follow us there if you're not already. If you've been to Switzerland, what mistakes you've made before, and we got so many responses. They made us laugh. A lot of them we could relate to, and we pulled from there and our own experience to come up with this list of 20 mistakes to avoid. Before we get into the tips, we have some helpful resources for you to make sure you avoid these mistakes and any others that you might make and just plan the best trip possible. All of these resources can be found at our website. We have a free Train Pass Selector tool, and we also have some paid services as well. If you want to connect one-on-one with Louis in a consultation, if you want us to plan your trip for you with a totally custom itinerary, or a much more affordable option for just $25, we have a series of different pre-planned itineraries that we have made all across Switzerland, all for different types of trips. So I encourage you to head to thetravelingswiss.com and check it out. But without further ado, let's get into those top 20 tourist mistakes to avoid.
Let's go. So the first general tip that I have is about euros and Swiss francs. This is for people that go in Europe and Switzerland. They tend to think that you can use euros in Switzerland, which is not the case. You should have Swiss francs. This will be rejected in most cases. So take your Swiss francs when you are in Switzerland. The second tip, also linking the EU and Switzerland, is about plugs and adapters. We have different type of plugs in Switzerland that they have in Europe, and so you might have an adapter, a Swiss adapter that can work in Europe but not the reverse. So make sure to have the type J adapter and you'll be able to plug all your electronics.
So the next general mistake that we see people making in Switzerland is not being aware of the language region that you are in. I'm sure this is something that I did when I first moved to Switzerland. But if you didn't know, Switzerland has 4 different national languages. I'll have a map on screen, but the largest one being German and the second largest one being French. So just be aware of where you are. There are some areas that it could switch really quickly. Like if you're going from Rougemont into Gstaad, very, very quickly the language switches from French to German. So just be aware where you are. No one will really mind, but it's appreciated if you know how to approach people in stores, if it's bonjour or grüezi or anything like that. So just be aware of the language region you're in Switzerland. The next question I get asked fairly frequently, and that is about drinking water in Switzerland. And the mistake is to think that drinking water isn't safe or clean here. In fact, it's some of the best tasting in the world, the best tasting I've had. It comes straight from glaciers and in the mountains in the Alps, so you don't need to be buying drinking water. The drinking water is perfectly safe to drink here. In fact, I definitely recommend it.
It's better even.
There's water fountains, very accessible all over cities and even in the most remote places and hikes. So just bring a refillable bottle of water and you can use that in your trip. You can even drink from the faucets in hotels. You won't have a problem. You don't need to go buy cases of drinking water. This last one I've spoken about in a lot of videos, and I think I've even alarmed some people with how much I've spoken about it. But that's just not being aware of the opening hours of things in Switzerland in general. Generally in Switzerland, it's a very Christian country. Sunday is the day of rest, kind of across the board. Most stores and shops and things like that will not be open on Sunday. So grocery stores, clothes stores, souvenir shops, anything like that won't be open on Sunday. Trains are open on Sundays. I get that question a lot.
Attractions
Are open on Sundays. Restaurants are open on Sundays. But if you're planning on doing your shopping on Sundays, that's something that you can't do. And another thing that's on the same kind of vein of this opening hours is things in Switzerland will maybe close earlier than you are used to, depending on where you're from. In Switzerland, a lot of shops and stores can close kind of as early as 6 p.m. during the week. So just plan for that. That can apply to restaurants as well, that the last seating might be around 8:30. You can't usually walk in at 9:30 and get a table. So just be aware that things close a little bit earlier, so your day might be ending a little bit earlier than you're used to.
So the next category is about trains. I know that a lot of you are maybe a bit stressed about taking the train in Switzerland. It's going to be fine, but the first mistake that we see is not having a valid ticket. First, it's not having a valid ticket once you step into the train, you have to buy that ticket before you get onto that train and before the train leaves, basically. The second thing about this mistake is not having the right type of ticket. The SBB app, for example, will default to a half fare ticket, but if you did not buy a half fare card, this is not going to be valid and you might get fined actually with this. So that's just something to be mindful and careful of. A second mistake that we see, and you can really lose a lot of money by making this mistake, is not having the right train pass for you or not using train passes. You have, for example, the half fare card, the Swiss Travel Pass, or regional passes that are really great for having some sort of convenience and also saving quite a lot of money if you're going to travel around Switzerland. We have a Swiss train pass selector that helps you actually use the train pass that is the most affordable for your trip. And we also have created videos around Swiss train passes in general. Another mistake around trains in general is not reserving in advance the panoramic trains. This applies mostly for the Glacier Express, the Bonina Express, and the Golden Pass Express. You can reserve in advance, I think it's up to 90 days, but you have a lot of people that sort of want to just show up there and then it's actually just full and they can just simply not take the train, and this is really disappointing. So try to reserve as early as possible these train and these seat reservations on these trains.
So the next tourist mistake to avoid is heading to the wrong train station. So you might think, of course I won't do this, but there's a lot of train stations in Switzerland that have similar names, especially within cities. So some common examples that come up on our consultations and then when we meet people kind of in real life. Grindelwald and Grindelwald Terminal, those are two separate stations. One goes up to the Jungfrau and then one is just the train station that kind of takes you all around Switzerland. In Interlaken, you have Interlaken West, Interlaken Ost, the East Station. In Zurich, you have a ton of train stations that will start with Zurich HB being the main station, but then you have Zurich Flughafen, that's the airport, Zurich Stadelhofen, that's by the opera. You have tons of different stations. So my recommendation is just you can use either the SBB app or Google Maps to figure out where you're going. You'll see the name of the station and just double check it before you get on the train. So the last tip in the train mistakes to avoid, and Louis is laughing, you'll see why in a second. I think I'm probably very well qualified to speak on this, and that is just be aware of your volume in the trains and public spaces. In general, I find that the Swiss population, correct me if you disagree, they're very private, they're very quiet, they speak very, very softly in public spaces.
We are aware of our surroundings, maybe.
It almost feels like they're whispering. I think being American, we tend to be louder. Being from New York, we tend to be even louder than that. I find even after living here for a few years, I'm generally the loudest person in the room. While people don't always say stuff to you on the trains, sometimes they might, but my advice in general is to just like listen to the volume of people speaking around you and try to match it as best you can. So we're moving into a new category of mistakes to avoid now. This is the sightseeing category. And we're starting with kind of an important one because it can really throw a wrench in your whole trip if you're not planned for it. And that is not planning for the seasonality of experiences in Switzerland. So much of what people come to do in Switzerland is in the beautiful Alps and in the mountains. And there are two main seasons for the gondolas and the funiculars and the transportation here, and that's the winter ski season, so the ski season, and then the summer season. There will be some significant closures in between them for both the Alps and then some other experiences too, like panoramic trains. So make sure you check the opening schedules. I would say particularly if you're coming in the months of April and May or kind of October, November, the early part of December, you can expect that you might have some significant closures. Some examples, the Glacier Express does not run the whole year. If you're in Interlaken, Schönelige Platte is only open in the summer. So just make sure, because some of these seasons might start later than you think. You might be thinking you're coming kind of Memorial Day weekend, May, everything's ready to go. A lot of things might still be closed. So just make sure to check that because that can really throw a wrench in kind of everything you're planning on experiencing.
The next tip about sightseeing, especially going into the mountains and hiking around, is not packing the right clothes for the appropriate season. First, I would say that having good shoes is really important, and even if you're not going to do huge hikes, it's good to have some good shoes I think in general, but you have a lot of people that sort of had a bad experience because they just didn't plan for this. So have at least very good sneakers or hiking shoes and it will be fine. You also have the whole layers that you should have. You are going in altitude, even if you're going in the summer, you're going high up and it might be cold. So it's good to have layers on you. So plan for this before you are going in altitude and on these gondolas. The next one, talking about gondolas, is not planning about their closure during the day and missing the last one. You might be sort of wanting to catch a sunset and going around on a hike. These gondolas typically close between 5 and 6. So give yourself time to get back to the gondola station or just make sure that you know how to get back down to the village. This can be really annoying and even dangerous if you don't plan for this. The next tip is around luggage and especially carrying your luggage around all day, for example, in a city. We see these and I feel bad. I feel bad about these people, even if it's a carry-on, just going around, I don't know, Zurich, Lucerne, the whole day. You can actually put your luggage in lockers in all the train stations in Switzerland. This is a small fee. Sometimes you need actually some coins for this, but put this in there and then you can freely go around, explore the city and take your luggage when you're going to take the train. So this is important. You're going to save yourself some hassle and also the risk of disturbing the Swiss peace in terms of noise. So put your luggage in lockers and then you are free to go. The next one is also around sort of going in mountains, taking gondolas, and is not checking the weather and the webcams before going on your day. I really recommend having a look at these webcams first to see if you're going to have a clear sky or if the top of the mountain is fully in a cloud. This is really going to impact your decision and your experience if you're going to just see nothing in a cloud, and you can maybe shift around some activities, but checking the weather is great. Also check the weather maybe before you have 2-3 days in the same region, and then you can decide when to go on the highlight of that trip.
So the next sightseeing mistake to avoid is getting sucked into those tourist traps. We have a video here about the tourist traps that we recommend avoiding. In general, there aren't a ton in Switzerland, but there are some, mostly because of how they're being shown on social media that can be very misleading. So the example that's coming to mind right now is the Gelmerbahn. A lot of people ask us about it and think it's this like exciting roller coaster, but in reality, those videos are sped up like 20 times. So don't get sucked into those tourist traps. I recommend watching this video here and then you'll be much happier with, I think, where you visit in Switzerland. So the last tourist mistake to avoid in the sightseeing section is to not prepare for altitude, especially if you're like me and you're from somewhere that isn't used to experiencing altitude, then you're not used to going up in the mountains and kind of just existing at sea level. You'll see that being in the mountains can be much more physically taxing than you might be preparing for. So if you're preparing on doing some hikes up in the mountains, or even if you're planning on going to some of those super high peaks like Matterhorn Glacier Paradise or the Jungfraujoch, definitely prepare for it. You might be a little woozy. Take your time. I think especially if you're planning on undertaking, especially if you're trying to undertake any kind of hike up in the mountains in Switzerland can get very, very high and altitude sickness is a real thing. So just prepare for it. I recommend bringing snacks, water, and just give yourself a little bit of grace if you're not used to altitude. So moving into our last category of mistakes, everybody's favorite topic, and that is money mistakes to avoid. I will start with the first one. This is directed mostly at my fellow Americans, and that is only coming to Switzerland with an American Express card. American Express is not particularly widely accepted in Switzerland and in Europe in general. Some countries more than others, but in Switzerland, I've noticed that American Express is not kind of accepted blanket across the board. Many restaurants and things don't have American Express that they take. I had an American Express card when I first moved to Switzerland, and I wound up getting some other credit cards that work more widely here. Two that I have that I like, I have a Marriott Bonvoy card and I have a Chase card with United, neither of which have international fees. I'll put the links to those in the description if you're interested in checking them out, but I recommend having an option other than American Express. So the next money mistake to avoid is not having any coins on you. Coins in Swiss currency actually go up to 5 francs. So you have half 1 to 5 francs. You have some really large coins. I always recommend having some on you. Try to break a bill kind of when you first get here and have coins, because they're used in many key places. Those luggage lockers that Louis mentioned, you can use them with coins. Paying tips, I think, is generally always paid with coins. Sometimes they won't even ask you if you pay with a card if you want to add a tip. in a restaurant. If you're using a public bathroom, those are often paid in Switzerland, and you will need to pay those usually with coins. So coins are generally something I always recommend having on you. They come up every now and then that you just need a coin and you can't use cash or a card.
Yeah, I would say having like a 1 and 2 franc coin is what you need. And the last tip about money is actually tipping too much. We do not tip in Switzerland like in the US 20%. It's more of a roundup if you enjoyed the service. So for example, if I have a bill that is maybe 82 francs, I can leave 3 francs or 8 francs, for example, but we will not give more than this usually. So that's something to avoid. And we typically do not really tip that much, except in service, maybe around hotels and restaurants. But at the hairdresser, for example, you won't tip anything.
So that is it for us, guys. Hopefully you don't make any of these mistakes that we mentioned. If you think we left any other ones out, please let us know in the comments. I think it's helpful for all of you to engage with each other, but I always like reading them too. So let me know if you think we missed anything. As always, thank you so much for watching this video. If you enjoyed it and you haven't already, please make sure to like and subscribe. If there's any other type of content you want to see in Switzerland, please let us know that too. I'm always hanging out in the comments, whether or not I respond, I'm always reading them. So that is it for us, guys. We will see you in the next one.
Bye, guys.
Bye. Hey guys, thanks for watching.
Thanks for watching.
If you want to see more videos like this, please make sure to like and subscribe. We'll see you soon.